Level 2 animals. That, incidentally, Monday's a good day. It's the little things that count. Monday, I, went and found the little setting and switched it, and I removed the. That's nice. I can see the four of you. Thank you. I removed the. I changed the settings so it won't open like iPhoto and iTunes when I go back and forth between my share screen. And little things like that mean a lot, right? Okay, so we're over here. And you have an 18 by 24 paper. Hopefully it's got some more space on it for some more animals. I've got to say that looking at these animals, maybe you noticed, okay, and most of the animals that, they're cute, right? We select them because they are really cute. I don't know if I would say they're the easiest to draw. You may have noticed if you drew several of them and you also did the French Bulldog, that many of them have a sort of uniformity to their fur, or, like they're a little, it's kind of surprising. Now everything is the same, it's all forms. We've heard that a lot of times. But for what I'm speaking about is how something in a source like this, where you have short fur, but then you have this patch thing where, I don't know how that got unlocked. Let me lock that again. When you have the switch, great switch in value, and this was the case on the dog that I used last time, there's a big jump, okay? And a lot of the animals that I've provided are sort of like, well, there's little shifts in brown or the fur, but they don't have this kind of stuff. They're not patchy like that. So if you were drawing the capybara, and by the way, if you give me a nice capybara, you'll score points with the professor, okay? Good capybara drawing equals, my opinion of you will rise if you give me a nice capybara. But that would certainly be an example of this, in which you have a fuzzy, it's pretty uniform kind of thing going on. Whereas with the French Bulldog, with the Pit Bull something mix, I'm guessing, that was sniffing that fish, with the Boston Terrier, you have things like this. And I would say that if I were to provide an image of a Holstein cow with its patches, that's going to be easier to sort of see shape changes when it's like, it's got these blotches. Follow along with me and let's see. Now, I might do some things in the sketchbook first, just to make some points. But let's do a little, looking at this this Boston Terrier, okay? Now, I've been trying plenty of times. I've been out to, where's my little, yeah, there it is. I was looking for my little pencil thing. I have been out to several times since the beginning of the class, or not the beginning of the class, since we introduced negative spaces, and certainly once I started saying shape and value, what shape do I see, how light or how dark. We have been instructed to There's a little slip up there. You see it? We've been instructed to kind of try to learn to do this with our eyes. You know, when I'm talking about trying to imagine we're the Terminator and locking in on shapes and sort of now when we do contour work, it may be that we are doing this. We know how to move our eye along an edge. And so on the first day, we may have been doing this. Okay. But, you know, seeing entire shapes, I don't know if we were doing that the first day necessarily, but we certainly, by the time we got into charcoal, we're trying to be able to do this with our eye. Okay, and I was doing this last time with a pen, and I'm going to do it again because let me tell you, I don't have a stylus and a tablet, and I don't have a pen, and to just use my fingers on a touchpad, I don't have the nuance that I might have. You know, I've got a lot more control with a pen or a pencil, is what I'm saying. But this is basically the thing to learn to do, or half of what to do with our eyes in order to be able to learn to draw. But as I pointed out last time, this is the kind of shape, and of course, do not like make this a note of this and then say, okay, there's a Boston Terrier nose. Now I've got them, so I can just pull this back up anytime, because that's not what's going on. One tilt of the head and that's all changed, right? Which is why the symbol for eye is so bad. Remember, I was talking about the symbol for eye last time, and I was drawing off to the side. I'm just, I actually made it that's a little more not symbol-y there. I got to make a more sort of perfect almond shape, like a CBS logo or something. But if I just think about eyes and start doing that, okay, I'll never match what's actually there. Just you'll see at this point in the class, there's just a lot of repetition, and a lot of this is about no. Bye. A lot of this is just about sort of revisiting the same thing over and over, because what I'm erasing right now will keep coming up until we develop what we actually need to do. Doesn't want to erase that. Until we develop our actual shape seeing and what's actually there to the level that we want it or need it, we will still get compromises between what's there and some idea or expectancy of what is there. This could apply to ears also, although I've found that when I draw ears, or when I have students draw ears, that I get much truer things than noses and eyes and mouths and so forth, because there's not as much of a symbol coming up, and we are more able to just look at an ear with its very, very obvious kind of weird shapes. We will see an ear as an assembly of shape. And we'll come around to the eyes, nose, and mouth and have a harder time. And the eyes will be the worst of that. So we simply have to, for the upteenth time, I'll say it, because it's really what to say to ourselves repeatedly, is we have to be able to, whatever the heck it is, we have to be able to draw it. And if we can actually draw, now right now, I'm tracing a shape and nobody's going to miss it, because as I said, the Boston Terrier has a big fur value distinction. There's a blotch there and a blotch there, and they're very different, can't miss it. So everybody would be like, yeah, I see that. I know why you're tracing there. Of course, if I was going to cut this out, that's what I would do. But we are going to encounter lots of situations, more like this area in all of this, where the values change, but don't change that greatly. So this is a lot like charcoal still life work, where we're trying to, well, what about here? I can perceive a more reddish sort of area here. I can see a change, but its edge is soft. It's not that hard as some of the, what do I do? Well, I have to look harder, and, you know, I have to work harder at it. But if I do something like this, and I may not be, you know, as spot on as I could be if it had a hard edge on it. But do you see why I did that? Because that's where I can find the change. And of course, now that I've drawn that green line on it, it looks like it's very contained because I've covered up the places where I have to find that. Seeing now how it looks like a more solid piece of rust, you know, sort of, that is the name of the game right there. What I don't want to do is I don't want to ignore all that stuff like that that actually happens in here. And, well, I know there's an eye there, so I'll get this, which I'm at danger of drawing too large and simplifying, and then kind of being like, well, whatever, he's got hair, you know, and putting some kind of hair, you know, something like that there. I don't want to just do that. I want to be as interested in what is going on in here as I am in that eye and this nose, which I won't be. My brain will say, this is not a lot going on. That's everything. This is everything. Get those two and you're good. Don't worry about that. Well, what's in there? It's some fur or whatever. Can't be like that. Take that out. Hopefully you're finding that kind of annoying, you know, or distracting. It can't be like that. Rather, the ideal condition would be that any value change is as important as any other value change. Okay, so this outer contour here that everybody will do or try to do, even if I give no drawing instruction, the change between this value and this one, between really light and really dark brown or purple brown or whatever, I have to be as interested in seeing something, you know, even if it doesn't have, now this one maybe I'll get, if I'm being kind of cursory, I'll get that one because it's distinct. And maybe I'll fill in all of this with one dark overall value, the way we did when we started an object in the still life. And it will probably hold up just fine. But what I want for my eyes is to be able to be as attuned to this value change versus that one, even though that we don't call those two different things. Does that make sense? There will be good examples as we go along. Just remember what I'm saying there, because there will be examples where, okay, I think I got it. I think, yeah, that's what he's talking about. This is all just a big sort of dark area, but no, I see a part of it that is like a little lighter, and that's what makes it really, you know, seem three-dimensional and turn in space. And I understand why, if I'm going to have really good drawing eyes, really good perception, that I have to care about that too, and that I have to be able to pick up or read with my eyes, that kind of thing. Okay, but for getting started, I think all of us can, you know, see some of these that are really easy to find, like big, obvious ones. And a few of those that you just nail will really do a lot as long as the value is good, okay? The problem is when we don't have much value range. Now let me go ahead and draw around on that shape. Now, what is that shape? Once again, if I go over here, and this will be much harder with my, I'd rather do this with a pencil or a pen, but if I try to approximate, because this is what drawing is like, right? If my eye was doing what I just did, and then I'm following along with my hand, trying to recreate what my eye was seeing. My eye was trying to see an overall shape. Maybe on my paper, I would do something like this. Trying to, if this is what I'm tracing with my eye or what I'm cutting out with my eye, that's what I like to call it. Cut it out with your eye. Like, learn how to cut it out with your eye. Now, this is why charcoal can be awesome, because we don't have to get that perfect. We can just do a general mass overall of something, and then we can go looking for these particulars, because those particulars are nuts. Look at the little toothy, pointy kind of things. That's the specific. I might begin, if I'm massing in, I might sort of put in an area of value with my stick of whatever that's kind of like that, and then go in and like push here to make that a little skinnier and add a little point there, or you know what I mean? Like, that's general to the specific. What I'm doing when I'm tracing these shapes is quite specific. It's, if you use a projector and you project an image and you trace, you will always get shapes like this that are just so far from what you would do if you would hand draw it. What am I talking about? Because what I'm doing with this tracing stuff is talking about what is there to be seen. But often times, we're far from that kind of, sort of thing. It's not like our eye is so, computer badass that we can sort of like latch, but that is the thing to practice. With big simple shapes, you will get it. You'll get, like that negative space right there. You can get that. You can get that very exact. You can get this one pretty exact. But this is why I show you things like structure and sort of, where we do a chunky kind of, whoosh, whoosh. We start off kind of doing some light, choppy lines that look more like this, because we know we can't, like, right? You get the idea. It's kind of hard with that, but when we're going like that and kind of working all this stuff out, no fear of the stray line, we might put some lines in like that and then study this space. What's that shape? I might have some light pencil lines kind of going like this, and then I look close at that shape to help me get it exact, and that shape and this shape, because I can't, until I get like really good, I can't like make those perfect cutouts right away. I have to kind of keep this loose, lay the foundation, remember all those analogies, right? But I've always found that this kind of stuff is most helpful because this is how we're trying to see, right? We don't want to be thinking about it and, there's an eye somewhere in there and kind of, you know what I mean? We can't just be like drawing, we have to be shape obsessed kind of. And the more we read the shapes, the better it will get. Now, the flaw of the little computer draw thing I've got here, and actually most programs like Photoshop, you actually like, you do a fill and you kind of, I don't really have something here that I would particularly want to use to try to talk about copying values, actually. While I find what I've been doing to be harder for me than a manual pencil trace or tracing with a red pen on a printed piece of paper. I can still, do it and show you this with these red lines on the screen, which is valuable. But I don't know a way, and I would be unwilling to try to get into, gradations of value this way. Let's take these off and let's sort of visit. So what I'm saying is I've got a digital device that I'm using, or I was just using, that helps me get the contours of shapes. But when it comes time to talk about value work, I'm absolutely interested in switching over to here. Who has a printer? If you have a printer, I would actually suggest going back just to get this one. I fear this straight line. I got to get rid of this straight line. Just kidding. If you have a printer, I think it might be worth doing. Okay, you can follow along if you don't have a printer. But if you have a printer, I think there's merit, and you can do this if the printer is not, if it's not in full color, that would be fine too. Black and white would be all right. But if you make 2 of these, okay, and this could be 2 of anything, but you might want to make it the Boston Terrier, so you follow along, and you might want to make it the Boston Terrier because, as I said before, it has these handy major value changes, whereas, if I had put a wombat in there with the capybara along with this, a lot of that, it's just they don't have these kind of, things like that to kind of give us an anchor, okay? Okay, are we ready? Sure, we are ready. Let's position, and of course I keep thinking this is my brother's late Boston Terrier, Simon, who was very devious and kind of complex, always getting up to trouble, and it was a funny little dog that liked to, you never knew what kind of mischief that could, but anyway, anecdote. Okay, so if we are going to mass in, or if let's say we have done the thing where I really do see these shapes really well, but I want to talk about value changes in here. This value range is pretty dark, right? So let's say that I have a little bit. Remember when we were doing the still life and we're working with charcoal, I was saying, like, we'll minimize this kind of stuff, do just the bare minimum. So something like the division between that or this and that, just like the outside contour, I imagine people might do that for just the major stuff. And here's the thing. I'm going to turn on an extra little side light here, see if it makes any improvements to my desktop. Oh. No, it makes it less to my liking. I'll turn that away. Here's the thing. All of this part of the Boston Terrier's this part of the Boston Terrier's head is really dark. Okay, so the first thing I want to emphasize is, let's say I'll put in a big shape overall. The first thing I'd say is let's try to really make that pretty even, but let's not get it let's not underdo it. Now, there's a thing that happens. I've talked about it before. I had examples up on the screen with, especially in Zoom sort of things, but like graphite, light will actually bounce off of the graphite a little bit because that silvery quality. And sometimes I wonder if it sort of doesn't, exasperate the sort of issue. But I know that if I take this far enough, I'll get the point across, which is that, see the difference between these? This, I can say to myself, it's sort of the value equivalent of what I was talking about with eyes and symbols. I can say to myself, okay, I filled it in. I'll call this good and dark. But is it? When I'm working with students, and believe me, I wish I could just sort of, I wish I could reach over your shoulder sometimes and just sort of say, hey, no, don't be afraid. Don't worry. Just go ahead and like really bear down on that pencil. Even if you know there's an eye that's going to be there, if the eye is, if it's all of that is pretty dark, other than some little shiny spots, then hey, that's a kind of a smaller shape. If I was using charcoal and I was working on some objects, I wouldn't, if this was a pitcher or a vase, I probably would be, okay with it. I got to be okay with it here, which is to not settle for a value that may be much lighter than what I'm actually seeing. Okay. Which is easy to do. When I'm working in actual classrooms and I can go over people's shoulders, it's very common for me to say, here'd be some of that more little nuanced stuff that I'm actually picking up when I'm talking. But I actually say, if it's really rich and it's really dark, then say so. And if then you see within that, see what's happening here. Yeah, there's definitely, okay, I was just talking about zoom and I was just talking about light and I was just talking about, I'm actually making and what I'll do is I'll turn the tablet and see if it makes any difference or if it changes this. But what's happening is you see how I'm getting darker, but it's reflecting, right? That's kind of a nuisance. Let me see. See if I turn that to where my overhead light is like basically I tilted my paper. So the overhead light, see that that reflection? Now this is not some like don't use graphite kind of thing. It's just like lighting can sometimes be a pain. And that's why I'm so obsessed with it. But see how I hold it up like that and I get it out of the light bouncing off situation. You can see I've got two values there, right? So what I'll do is I'll proceed, and I actually have already got, I have a solution for that very thing too, because I've got another kind of drawing board that has a tilt on it. And if this, once I start doing drawings, which will be pretty soon, because we're going to be doing figure drawing stuff, once I start putting things on a tilt, it'll probably, but I still may have to move lights sometimes just because of glare and things like that. But please remember, okay, please remember to go as rich and dark as is required, because you may need an area of tone, and then you may need a value within that that is even darker. And I'm going to just try to make those. And I'm going to try to be like into that, the way I'm into an eye. Like I see an eye and it's like, well, I've got to get the Boston Terrier's eye, but I also want to get all of these things in an area where we might just say that's just a big patch of whatever. I want to get that as well. Okay. So make sure that you don't hold back or you're not overly cautious, because uh, many of you, I think, that's the case. And taking a higher number of B into your hand can help with that too. Hang on just one moment. Okay, everybody sees the change. Okay, and what the change came from was me turning off the overhead light source. So now my light source is just from the side. So now I don't have the big reflections going on. So now I can, you can see that better, right? Everybody can see it better. Somebody give me a nod there. Yeah. And as a result, now, of course, my desk is, you know, dimly lit now, but that's okay. I'll deal with it. But what we can see here is we can see that I've got a couple of values. This would be an example of like, do I see a place in there where I can have a change from this to this? This eye, I've noticed that there's a real common tendency to kind of dance around or be really careful. If in a place like that, like eyes, like actually sort of drawing an oval kind of or a walnut shape and then like staying away, and if that area, if you squint, you'll see that you can only see the highlights probably, and the subtleties it means that the values are quite close together. So I don't want to get carried away trying to like render everything about that when it's actually, like there's a shape around it with a subtle change. But if I make that too much, right? Because I want to, because it's the eye and I know that eye is in there, and something like this, well, then I'll be sorry. Okay, it will look sort of, So try to not be as into the place that we want to make so important, and rather just be like, well, the value changes are small. It's dark and darker still. And that's what I'm going to say. Because the biggest thing, big value changes tend to stand out a lot. So the biggest value change is actually between this fur and that fur. It's not, the eye is where the big meaning change is in our head. When we get to people, everybody will contend with this. You'll contend with how there's a big meaning change existing already that you expect. But it may be that there's a shiny spot on my nose that is lighter than anything that's in my eye, right? And we don't want to believe it. So I've got an animal that has some big sort of changes going on, but they aren't what we expect. We expect to be spending a lot of time talking about particulars around noses and eyes and things like that, mouths. And it may be that because of angle or whatever, that, we can't even really see that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, if my picture was just a little more high contrast, I would see even less distinction of the eye from the stuff that surrounds it. So that can be tough, but the answer is never to be more cautious and keep everything lighter. It's that whole thing, like if this is a really dark value, push down on the pencil and really make it so. So you see what I've got over here right now? How like I could stop, but have I really matched that value? Right? This is something that we tend to do in the beginning until we kind of, I will come around to a desk and I'll be like, hey, in the places, now don't just do this everywhere. If you may have some tones that there aren't any in this example right here, but there may be some like midtones or some middle grays that, that's, you do have them matched. But it's not unusual. Matter of fact, it's all very commonplace for me to be saying like, well, if it's really, go for it. Like, tell me, show us, that it's not just a little application, it's, so the two ways you can get that are by pressing quite a bit harder. And the other way is by making sure you've got a pencil in your hand that is good and soft, right? So, you could work with your 4B for a while in an instance like this, and if it seems like it's still like, kind of, I might get the 8B out, and try, to drive some values even farther, right? So this, once again, after I did all that sort of stuff about the, contours, line work that's about the contours of the shape at the beginning, this is the value thing. There's two things that I can get right or I can not get right. And we tend to, like we might look at my drawing the way it was a second ago before I added some information, and we might think that I've misdrawn like something from a shape standpoint, meaning, oh, you got the proportions wrong, you need to move that nose, or something like this. But it may just be that there's a big light and shadow thing, which is always described by a value, that I didn't have. So when I darkened right through there just a moment ago, that was actually really beneficial to my drawing. I could have easily thought that I needed to render a mouth in there, or I need something something is inaccurate line-wise or whatever. But it may just be that, I had a lighter patch. I needed a darker patch of tone in there. So I really really quickly go for that, and that functions that way. It counts. In painting, I make a lot of comparisons between that kind of work because basically it's in black and white. It's value work. But when you get into painting and you get into color, it's very similar. We will want to draw perfectly something when what we need to do is get a color matched. Like that's the thing that's needed. That's the thing that's counting the most. But we will try to figure that it's, a drawing issue, not a color issue, or it's a line, we'll try to make it something else. So how about red? I think when I introduced value, I might have asked, like, what value is red, right? And we may have talked about how a yellow may be on the lighter end of a value scale, and a blue might be a little bit, depending on which blue, maybe the blue is towards the darker end of the value scale. But it's like, so there's this red. I don't even know what that is, if it's dog color or reflected light or whatever, but there's some red down there. And what shade of gray would that be? right? But basically, I've got a subject here in this example that requires of me, if I'm really going to, value match it, I've got to get some pretty rich and dark values. And I may also, when I'm trying to refine the shapes, I may want to, with my really soft pencil, which gets dark very easily, I may also want to look around and make sure that I'm not just getting sketchy marks, but that I have other types of toning going on, and maybe buff some of that in and make it less sort of, okay. Let's go back to a start of sorts with this stuff. If you have two, okay, if you did have two of these printed out, okay, I say okay a lot. Say so, say okay. If I had two of these, I'm going to take this one and I'm going to get my red pen out. Let's see if we can see it. I'm guessing it might not be the easiest thing to see right here. Yeah, I don't have, I wish I had like a crazy orange color pencil or something right handy, but let's play this same sort of game I did a minute ago with the program itself. And let's try to do some of this transferring of shapes thing. I don't know if there's such a thing as doing too many examples of this. Everybody play along. I might turn the overhead light back on. Give me a second. We'll go with that since at the moment it's not all about value. All right, shape here around the nose. Everybody ready? I could literally trace it right on my paper, which is why I printed out two. And I encourage you to do this. And then maybe you notice the distinction, like, well, that's easy, right? Especially with a thing like that, I can see the shape so easily, as opposed to the variations in these things when the values are, I can see that. See this one, I can trace this one pretty easy, Mullins. I can definitely do that. And then maybe when I go over here, because the one I did on the where I literally traced, that's my eye, right? That's my eye looking at that shape. This is me trying to perfectly follow along what my eye was doing. And that, again, it will always be a surprising shape. It'll always be something that, like, I just wouldn't do, let's try what we call the nose. But this would be like, if I could do that really well, and of course, practicing this will make my perception better. But if I could do this really well, my contour work is going to be very strong, right? Now, if I go in here and I can distinguish a little shape, if there's an area, we call these nostrils, let's call them the nose holes here. If I can see that in there, because it's darker still than an already dark area, which the next part of this game would probably be which value from the grayscale would I put into that? This is why we might, play games like cutting stuff out, you know, in color theory classes. They might cut stuff out of magazines or whatever because we're looking, you know, we actually do that. We make these really stencil-like kind of things, and then I'll go to old magazines or whatever, and I'll try to find something already printed on a page somewhere, and it's like, well, that's pretty good. That's a similar value or color, and I'll try to cut out that little shape, right? But what I have to do here is I have to fill it in with a pencil. And if I've just got a 2B, which is not going to get as rich and dark as an 8B automatically, but if I just got a 2B and I've imitated the shape, you know, I may have to bear down on that and really do it to get it good and dark, right? What value is that? Well, we call that, like, you know, that's white fur. That's like, you know, well, maybe there's some reddishness stuff over here. Maybe we would put some subtle kind of stuff on that, but we might not put a ton of tone on it, right? Maybe there's just some real light kind of things. What value goes here? What would you say? You say, like, well, it's not the darkest one, like that nose hole that you got out of there. That's a really, you know, but it's pretty dark, right? So again, maybe frightened at first because I feel like I'm gonna, you know, do something rash and get myself in trouble, or go, you know, I'm just actually going to really make it so. You follow? Everybody follow? Let's get some more shapes out of this. What is that one? Let's try just straight up drawing it. I won't take my red pen and trace on my paper immediately. I'll just try to look at it. And of course, I'm looking from, here's my sketchbook, here's another two-dimensional image. They're a matter of inches apart. So it's a little easier than trying to like do that from like a live person that's like 6 feet away from me in real space, you know. But what do you think? Does it, something like that? Right? For that shape? Right. Okay, we did lineless drawings. And you've been contouring with the red pen. I see what you're doing. Okay, but what if we are doing that thing where we don't even try to get the shapes particularly, you know, refined at first? Let's say I really loosely sketch in. Maybe I'm doing chunky stuff, structural style, right? So I've got some of this kind of stuff to get me started, rough cuts of the sculpture, as it were. And then I look at the negative space in here, you know, and use that to, and this one over here. And, you know, I just do a couple of checks to get it a little more, you know, but I'm doing that thing that the teacher has talked about where I don't get in a hurry to perfect shapes right away, but rather I start doing patches of tone. So I'm rubbing my pencil on its side to try to get away from pencil lines, or, you know, let me tilt this up because I turned the overhead light on again. You know, I'm making some different values by rubbing like that. And I mass in. And what will happen is as I'm applying value, my first priority is how light or how dark. I'm not being like, what exact shape is that immediately? I'm just, what value needs to go in there? And as I do that, I'll keep looking and I'll get more acquainted with the shape. I'll just keep rubbing. It really is my favorite way to draw, actually. It's such a thing. I mean, I've got like, you know, in a lifetime, the amount of line work is probably still like so much more than this kind of thing. But what happens is when you turn that corner and you start just toning and looking at tone changes, what happens with this stuff is that it actually suits my casual lazy personality a little better or something. I don't know, like the fact that or maybe it's just maybe it's the doing painting, but the fact that just a blob of tone that approximates the impression and that is fine, that doesn't, like, there's no big penalty for being loose like that, I think is probably where the appeal comes. And the fact that I can handle graphite, which I do have more control over in a way that is not unlike charcoal. And lay, where would you say that value is? And by the way, I could work it more, because can you see the paper still showing through a little bit? So I know I could keep going, right? I know I could sort of keep pushing this and get a darker value. But what value would you say that is right now on the right side of the Boston Terrier? 70%? 80%? If I give this pencil everything I got and I really press on it hard and I work it around and there's no paper showing through and I make it, like, that's probably my max, that right there. If that's 100%, what's that, right? So working with some splotches of value, and doing a quick tonal drawing of the Boston Terrier that way. Okay. Micron pen. Has anybody done some pen drawings yet? I got a nod there, Zong. You have a pen drawing of an animal I can see?
Yeah.
Hold it up real close to you. Now, sort of pen automatically gives you contrast, so we ought to be able to. So there's a platypus in pen. Okay, a little higher so we can see there's another animal. We got a platypus, and then there's a lemur. Now, fabulous. Thanks for the example. I noticed, though, in those pen drawings that the paper sort of shows through, you know what I mean? Like, there's all this work around the contours and stuff like that, maybe some stripes or something, but I see the paper coming through everywhere on them, right? Would you say it's harder to fill in? You know, like if you've got a big brown fur area on something, or so the platypus, for example, has, and I certainly didn't create any examples of this in pen last class. The platypus, this is all sort of like, you know, now it's not as dark as the foot. That's the darkest place, right? Or this. But, you know, this is all brown. And then there's some shapes that I could, again, not super easy to find their edges, but I could put my pin on there and I could say like, well, these are little highlight shapes, right? But here, I need a value, right? I need a value that's like something. It's not as dark as that, but it's like, and of course that's easier to do with a pencil than it is with a pen, right? So maybe like maybe I'll fill that in, but what the heck am I going to do with that when I got like a little incisive kind of pen? Good question. What would I do with all of this stuff? Would I just wear out my pen, use up all the ink, kill it? Would I cross hatch it? Good question. So this is that thing. I think I talked about it a little bit, just like I was drawing the bill of the platypus when I said it last time about how, it's easy to do contour of something like the bill, and then I can see that there's a shape here on the bill, and that's darker, and it's like, well, then what do I do? And so I began kind of like maybe something like that goes onto the bill of the platypus, and maybe I'm okay with that. But when I start getting into these large areas of, geez, it's maybe I'll stick with contour work instead of trying to create value with the pen as so much, right? Like I love doing line work with the pen and using a thicker pen to make a different line weight. But when it comes time to fill in tone, it gets a little more challenging because I'm stuck with this point and I'm stuck with ink. And the ink is a darker value no matter what I do, right? I can go like this to make values. I try to be really light and ginger on the surface, and I try to press a little bit. But it's hard to get as much control of, that kind of stuff, right? It can be done, but it requires a little more from me, doesn't it? Right? Well, another example of that, because like I've said, most of these furry creatures that are so cute are more subtle in their transitions than the Boston Terrier. Okay, so not a very big reproduction, but let's try one of each from Punxsutawney Phil here. Okay, if I am going like this with my pen, then perhaps I can duplicate, what I'm seeing with the fur, but the divisions of shape within that fur are trickier here than with the pencil, but I'll try. Maybe doing this groundhog will make me want to draw the sea lion with my pen. The comparative smoothness making the sea lion more given to contour and line work and a little less. But then the sea lion has brown values and little shiny spots and stuff like that. So massing in with a pencil, yeah, I'm getting a little frustrated, right? Yeah, this groundhogs are furry, and line work, can be tricky in a case like that. But, we have things like this. We have this is similar, right? We've got the lighter place there around the muzzle. We've got darker, we call that a nose. And then we've got lighter, and we've got a little lighter spot there. And if I establish tone, I can put darker tone still in. And I would recommend you do that rather than trying to do that stuff I was talking about earlier where we're afraid and we dance around the eye because we know it's the eye area and we get all uptight, you know, we feel like we can't mess it up and so forth. But if it's an area that's in shadow, first and foremost, we need that, right? So there's that, you know, and maybe if I worked on this a little bit longer, I'd get a groundhog that I could appreciate. But let's take out a pencil and try a tonal from the exact same image, reading the exact same information, the difference being the media that I have in my hand. So with a 4B, let's try to just start putting in tone and comparing light and dark. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in tone with this more on its side and worn down so it's a little more crayon-like. Just asking myself if it really helps to squint. It always helps to squint, see breakdowns of light and shadow. And we know at this point, if we can draw shadow and light patterns, then that's the ticket. We talked last time about shadow and light patterns. You know, boy, was it harder with the little sharp fine point pen. It's really easy to start doing fur, you know, like fur marks and kind of, you know. But if I want to get patches of overall, I know I've got that reflective light thing again. I'll hold this up in a minute, but you know, if I establish fuzzy patterns of tone, you know, then I can say like, well, where do I need to press that farther and where can I get even darker? And with a little more pressure on my pencil, I'll make some darker values still. And by continuing to apply the tone and keep going over the same places, get a little bit more familiar with shapes. So get more variation in the value. Press a little harder to make a darker value still when it makes sense because I saw it, you know, and get my groundhog underway this way. And then if I've established this stuff that way, let me see if I can get it in the shot. Yeah, there we go. If I've established this stuff that way, then I can, if I go in and I've got some of that fur and whisker information going on, it'll be able to bear it, right? Okay, somebody who's got a let's see a Boston Terrier. Who's doing a Boston Terrier, and we'll show it. Shelley, you've been drawing a Boston Terrier?
Of what?
The dog.
Only in pencil.
Let's have a look. Oh yeah, yeah. It looks very nice. There's a little bit of that dance around the eye thing going on where because it gets a little slighter. There's like a little shapes around it gets ever so slightly lighter. But they're not as big as that. So
okay.
Watch out for that thing where we get kind of like cautious around the eye. But yeah, good. Anybody else drawing a Boston Terrier that they want to hold up and let us see? Oh wait, there's a groundhog. I see a groundhog. Any other canine or rodent friends, or canines that look like they're half rodents, like Boston Terriers kind of do, or have ears like a bat, or any others? Okay. All right. So check it out. This is where this goes. Okay. Now, no, the professor's not insulting anybody saying they look like a groundhog or a Boston Terrier. That's not what's going on. But, you know, if you can draw less complicated living things, although I don't know if it's true always that, you know, sometimes uh, it may be that they change between something like a beard, you know, value wise. Like I may have more stuff that's easier to distinguish here than if I was drawing, you know, that sloth from the other day. You know, I may have more like easier sort of shape changes to find in this profile picture of you know, a dead painter from long ago. Uh, so let's play the same game. The ear. I always get good ears before anything else in figure drawing. You know, what is an ear anyway? You know, like we will just look at them. We don't have as much of a kind of, you know, well, yeah, there's some things like that in there. You can't miss them, you know. And we will actually examine an ear as form and study it as shape in a more objective way than we will, you know, I mean, ears don't look back at us, right? I am not intimidated by this ear. I can analyze and break down something like that, you know, and I don't have it exists, the sort of cartoon image of an ear maybe in my head, an idea of what an ear looks like, but I will not demand, you know, uh, a light. You know, I'll be pretty receptive to simply asking myself what shapes are those and what value do they need to be, and that will be harder for me to do when I get around to the eye. Okay. Uh, Common errors as a result of me doing things like that. Not paying enough attention to places like this where there aren't facial features. Besides drawing the eyes larger than they are, because we're so interested in them, that which is the number one mistake. The second biggest one may be doing parts of the skull that don't contain the facial features smaller than they actually are, meaning foreheads and the part of the skull is covered by the hair, and spaces like this, we'll scrunch them. We'll actually not give them enough space. So while we get the eyes too large, we will actually, you know, end up with not enough space in these places that we think are not as fun and interesting. And now I was warned about this long ago by my teacher when I was a kid in college, and I thought, well, I felt like I was a pretty good drawer, and I was working away at a self-portrait, looking in a mirror. We were all doing that, and the teacher, who was normally flamboyant, loud, and sarcastic to most of us, came around and leaned over my shoulder and said, Paul, well, why don't you go back by the coat rack there and take a look at what you're doing? And then moved on to the next person. And I did that. I stood up and I walked back, you know, 4 or 6 feet or whatever, and I looked at what I was doing, and I had totally done it. I had made my eyes way too big. I had no idea because I was really close to my work and I didn't realize it. I looked like a deer. I had these ginormous eyes and I had completely fallen into that you know, pitfall that I've been warned of. So number one error is making things that we think are important bigger than they are, and the eyes are, well, you know what they say, the eyes have it. I like eyes as much as anybody else, the windows into the soul and all of that, but we must not get them too large. And we do it. We also will get the rest of the skull, and we won't believe that we're doing it. We may have to look at what we're doing from far away to see it, but we will get the part of the skull, like in here, where we don't think that there's anything terribly exciting. We will make that smaller. So in a profile picture like this, I could easily make this too large. And then I could also say, well, the part of the eyes that I know, not information about the lids or the socket or the brow, but you know, we call them the whites of the eyes, like around the pupils and the iris and all that. We usually show way more of that because we know they're there and we're thinking about them. But so I'm doing an example of that. I've got this eye too big. I have the open part of the eye too big, right, on this old guy. And I'll easily decide that, well, it's not that, it's the nose, or it's the, like, whatever, it's the, you know, like I may have to back away so I can see the comparison of the elements, because a lot of the stuff that we don't like that we do is some version of the symbol or expectation, but also, you know, thinking about individual parts rather than the relationships. So the way that I'm doing this right now is that kind of thing that I tell you about, where I might do okay drawing this way, but I'm kind of doing it the hard way because I'm doing a part at a time. Oh, I'm drawing the ear. Now I'm drawing the eye. Now I'm going, there's the nose, and I'm sort of going duh, 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 duh. Whereas I could approach this, you know, with an overallness or something like that. I could come at this with a more general kind of approach, and I could make everything, or I could try to anyway. I could try to make everything the same in its import, and I could try to get value, light and shadow into the mix, and worry about perfect edges later. Because when I'm doing something like this, I'm keeping everything out of focus. Remember that comparison, drawing a picture and keeping it out of focus. But I might recommend that you all sometime, you know, just experience what it's like the second you go from drawing, you know, a Boston Terrier to a human. How all of a sudden, I mean, the eyes on the Boston Terrier might give you enough trouble as it is. But what will happen once it becomes a person is kind of amazing. You can kind of like feel yourself getting more uptight about it and getting pickier about it and so forth. Okay, so has anybody drawn an animal other than the dog? Yeah, let's, Henry and then Zong, let's see those other level 2. And then you also can tell me the species, phylum, order. I don't know that stuff. Let's see. Oh, move down a little bit so I can see what you got. Yeah, I see the Boston there right by your finger. Okay. How about you, Zong? Yeah, but see, it's in line. Can you get it closer to the camera? Let's see. Oh, it's tough. It's a tough light scene going on here today.
Light movie better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Supposed to be the seal.
Well, I'm down to see that seal, and I will later in you know, in a picture that you will send to me. Oh, oh, look at that seal. Who's holding up that seal there that I'm looking at? Uh, Show yourself.
That's me. Hi.
Thomas, okay, that's because there's a seal. I'm like, there's a very lovely seal. Now I see that it is Thomas's seal. Now, don't you find the seal uh, without the fur? Don't you find as a smooth? I mean, I guess this is no stretch because if you were drawing a vase, a ceramic vase, and then you went to the body of a seal, it would be different than drawing a ceramic. You know, you're drawing it, and all of a sudden there's all these little fur. Don't you find the fur to be really kind of? Remember last time I was talking about those small dark shapes, small ones that are sort of like in between bits of fur. Um, don't you find that to just be the challenge of challenges, the fur?
Yeah.
Um, and then there's a seal, all smooth and wet with a shiny highlight on it, you know, or two, and presenting its value changes to you. Thank you very much, Mr. Seal. Um, Maybe that was a seal that fishermen's wore for down along the coast where there's a place down by Hearst Castle. You heard of this on the West Coast where this ridiculous, you know, Hearst, like Patty Hearst's dad, who was the publisher who had all this money, but then it's really over the top and often tacky or whatever. But you can tour Hearst Castle, but not far from there is a place on the coast where the sea lions all come up to sun themselves. Like on a day, you might see like 50 of them, you know, and they'll come up and they'll take their tails and they'll throw sand on their bodies, you know, to cool themselves, and they'll lay there. It's like really something to see. And they're ridiculous and funny um, and cute. Okay. Stopping share and going back over to gallery view here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Let's all come together into uh, our meeting now, and let's talk um, because as much as I love to see, you know, the kind of up and down, looking and then down, looking at the source, looking at the paper, seeing people drawing away. Let's give me your attention, you know, your careful attention, and let's just converse because Monday we're going to have a critique, right? Now the first thing, the best way, you know, of course, the best way to have a good critique is probably just to bring good work, right? We could conclude like, well, if I bring good work to critique, I'm probably giving myself the best sort of chance of, uh, you know, it going well. But what does that even mean? Who's been in a critique before? Anybody in this group been in a critique? It's okay if you haven't. Okay, we got two. I've been in a critique before. Sometimes in other fields, I find in the non-majors classes, they'll go, well, I've had to present something before, and you know, like there's something they did. It's similar, but it wasn't the same, right? Um, the the thing about it is no, you probably haven't been in a critique before until you've been in a critique. Now, if you have had to do an oral defense, or if you have had to present some of your productions and sell them, as it were, you know, there might have been some things like that people have done, you know, but oftentimes my finding is art majors, you know, in the beginning may not have been in critique per se. Sometimes they say they've been in a critique, but it's like not really been in a critique. We won't have like some hardcore intense, you know, that's not going to happen. What do I mean by that? Well, like everything else, a lot of it has to do with like, well, what level are we on here? You know, like if I have a drawing one class, we certainly aren't going to have the same kind of critique that the graduate students are going to have, right? Uh, and then, of course, like, well, who composes that drawing one group? Because that group could be made up of people who are kind of on a higher level, in that regard, just like you can be on a higher level with the work that you're making. Like it's not like, well, everywhere you go, if it's drawing one, everybody's doing the same exact work. And the conversations and discussions aren't going to be like that, uniform like that either. And I say this because first thing we need to do is everybody here uh, needs to make a little bit of a promise to me and yourself and to each other, perhaps most importantly, that you'll understand that you are 1/14th of the organism that is this group, right? So you have, you can sort of like be contributing to that, or not. You can be like I am. If I come into a critique group, I have an impact upon what happens, you know. Some some discussion about this or some things that I think are really good to hear, a person like me say about critique. Uh, we try to connect any experience to previous experiences and experiences we have. So, who thinks critique is frightening? It's okay to be honest. Well, I still do, you know. I've been around forever. I mean, putting up things that you've made and hearing people say what they, oh, that sounds great. I think that's what I want to do with my afternoon. No, I think I'm another, you know what I mean? It's not a thing that you're like, oh, well, that sounds like fun. Let's go. You know what I mean? It's not, but what happens is that eventually, if you're in graduate school, you may be seeking that out, you know, uh, which is indication that you're like working on a certain level where you want dialogue that you wouldn't necessarily have even known you wanted or needed when you were just starting to make art. Um, is it public speaking? I hate that. Is it, we try to link it to other experiences we have, but take it from me that largely we haven't practiced this. We haven't. As a matter of fact, we've practiced the opposite. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm guessing that older influential people in your formative years rightly told you certain things. Like when I was told, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. That was a smart thing for somebody to tell me. Uh, you know, you're not going to do super well socially if you just roll up on people, and start launching into deep critical sort of, you know what I'm saying, unsolicited. Like uh, a lot of the things that have taught us how things work don't resemble critique at all. If you've gone to church, if you've gone to family gatherings, if you've gone to these things where there's been a group of people together, you know, uh, you weren't practicing critique, you know. Uh, as a matter of fact, the first time that people in group settings say critical things, most people get extremely uncomfortable, because we don't practice a lot of sort of like intellectual, detached, non-emotional discussion about success or failure of thing. We don't do that. We shore up our friends. We help people out. we say kind things. You will find you follow what I'm saying, right? Like we don't go through life practicing an art critique. We don't do that. And I'm very understanding of that. For example, uh, I I know that my role in introducing critique and leading a critique is to know that to expect us to just start sort of critiquing on some high level, like a grad student might in a non-majors drawing class, is not, you know what I'm saying. Whereas if you've got MFA students, then you can ask that of them. I may be having to introduce something, and that's what I do. You'll see, I have a format that leads and guides, and it sort of puts me in this place. But nobody is going to want to say anything that isn't complimentary or flattering, probably. That's usually like what is going on, is that we have to learn how to do that. We haven't been practicing how to talk about this kind of stuff, and we haven't been practicing how to be on the receiving end of it either. I'm actually really impressed oftentimes by how well CMU students do, though, because I think there's a kind of if people are articulate and they are sort of, they're less apt to get what I would say. I'll usually ask. I'll ask this now. What's the worst thing to do in critique? What's the worst thing to do? What might I have, like, the worst thing to do in critique that you're more apt to do if you are not used to a rigorous academic environment where people kind of, whoa, Thomas, how do you know that? Have you witnessed it happen? Everybody see in chat? That's it. And
Yeah.
Thomas, you get a sticker for sure, because usually when I ask that, I don't get that answer. But it's the worst thing to do. Have you observed it before? You seen it? Yeah. 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 Defensive. Don't get defensive. You don't have to. Okay. I suppose somebody could not be doing their end of the deal right, and they could be like, it could sound like, they could be at fault. Somebody could be at fault, but for the most part, defensiveness is, you're saying something that somebody you tell me, like, what does that mean if somebody's getting defensive? Sometimes it's behavior that people prefer to sort of pantomime or mimic or imitate more than describe. If I am like, well, I meant to do that. Like you point something out or you say something and I'm like, well, I like it that way. What am I doing? Right? It's like I'm sending messages that mean stop it, cut it out. I'm getting, you know what I mean? Like I am trying to basically prevent, what's happening by reacting in this way, right? And usually when I've seen people do, well, I meant to do it that way. No, they didn't. Somebody actually is just pointing out something that they think isn't working so well. I mean, maybe they did sometimes, but most of the time, I think what it is just kind of knee-jerk reaction. Like we kind of, because life has kind of taught us to be that way, like to get very uncomfortable, if we're hearing something. Now, we all like to hear flattery and praise. Matter of fact, since social media has come around, I can't believe, just speaking from my been around forever kind of perspective, I can't believe how normalized and acceptable, incredible. Like it's actually like, and I don't just mean like the humble brag. I mean like we now are able to literally, what was once seen as fishing for compliments was the phrase. Like you just go ahead and do it. Like it's just normal, right? Like I need some, from my friends, and you get it. Like here, take a look at this picture of my baby, and like all these people come back with all this sort of gushing, and it feels great, right? But that's not the same thing as you know, what we're going to try to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is we're trying to take advantage of an opportunity. Now that sounds crazy, right? You're telling me I've got to make something and put it up where people can see it, and so, but it does reveal a lot about how we have been socialized. How many times have you seen somebody get a test back with a bad grade on it and not bat an eye? You ever know? Now maybe everybody you know is like incredibly scholarly, and you know, but I've seen plenty of that in my life. Somebody gets a test back and it's got a really bad grade on it, and they're like, yeah, I thought so, and they put it away, and that's what, and they forget about it because like they're used to, uh, like that's happened day in and day out throughout 12 years of elementary school. You know what I mean? Like that, it's just not anything. How many times have you had somebody critique things that you made versus getting back, you know what I mean, papers and tests? You think about what's that?
I don't think I've ever got critiqued.
I mean, when we think about that, it's like, yeah, that's what's going on. It's like, uh, and if you get something back and the answer was 5 and you wrote down 4, well, then you got the wrong answer, and that's just what it is, right? But we have in our culture the idea that if you made something and it was art, then it's automatically just like good that you did it, you know, or like, you know what I mean? Like there's that kind of, and that may be true. It often is true. But when I've come across students that have actually had like training, like academic training in art, they often are looking for more of that kind of stuff than I even think I need to give. Like it has to do with what you're used to, is what I'm saying. If I had taken few exams in my elementary school days and then started taking them in high school, I probably would have gotten really pissed when they were handed back and they had these big, you know, it just, I certainly would be like, what is this, you know? But art is this kind of thing that sort of the mythology about it is that it's completely subjective. And really what's going on is that like we just don't, you know, have a category. I mean, when I look at the level of critique that the average guy drinking a beer, watching sports, when I look at the level of knowledge, like statistics and like stuff that will start coming out of them, and then their opinion about like, you know, how a player is kind of, I'll be like, my gosh, man, it's like you just unleashed this blistering, you know, and they're having fun doing it. You know, they're having like great fun doing it. And of course, that changes really quickly, I suppose, if it's their best friend who is the player in question. You know, but it really does have to do with what are you used to talking about and how are you used to talking about it. And so we will get like a little dip of our, we'll dip our toes in the pool or scratch the surface of the art, because it is also an art, of talking about work and talking about this kind of stuff, which I understand, you know, that I've got like vocabulary developed for that. And, you know, we tend to have, well, praise, not praise, right? You will experience this. Like nothing is easier in the world. Like you don't need to practice telling people like that is, dude, that is sick. That is so good. That is never going to like require a lot of practice. It's you know, that's there for you. But if there's something that you think that isn't, you know, in a sort of like, you know, people tend to think of it as positive and negative, and I actually think that should be changed in our heads too, because it's not just positive and negative. That we think about it that way though. If everybody says you know, you rock, we think that's positive. If somebody like criticizes, then we sort of, you know, and this is actually, I think, a little bit of a problem. We might look to our national political landscape, you know, we might have a walking monument, you know, in the recent years to that kind of thing. Um, Breakdowns in conversations, and you know, uh, I think about it this way. You can put up a hand or give me a little emoji or something. Which would you rather have if you could? Would you rather have everybody just always tell you nice things? Now think about it for a second, because most of the time I'm in a mood where that's yes, I know I'd like to. Could somebody say something? Thank you very much. But now think about it. Would you rather have people always just blow smoke, or would you like to be able to know what people really think? Which one would you like to possess? And of course, we don't have the latter. Now, we often feel that we can tell when somebody, you know what, I think that was sincere. I think they really meant that. All of a sudden, it's a much more valuable piece of, a much more valuable flattering remark, because I know that they really meant that. So it's about, I prize that. On the other side of the coin is we don't really like empty, fake flattery often. Maybe we'll take it or whatever, but have you ever had that? Which would you rather? Do you want to know what people really think? Wouldn't you like to? Or you just want to go through life and everybody always just blows smoke up your butt? You know? And usually when I ask that, people are like, oh, okay, I'm starting to see what you're thinking. And so we have an opportunity to actually get a little bit of that, or to try. And the other thing we have is, while we might go into a critique thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm terrified. It's a combination of public speaking and being kind of, there were those years where things like American Idol were forming the general public's idea of what criticism was. Like you put on a performance and there's three people there, and one of them's the sweetheart, Paula Abdul, and one of them's like a nice guy, but in the middle kind of, and then there's a jerk named Simon who always says mean things, and it's, and people would sort of like, oh, like, I can't believe you compared that to, a critique in art, but it really is that things like that give people ideas about, feedback and criticism. Like, okay, that person is an advocate for me and supports me, and this person over here is mean, and they're kind of creating that kind of stuff for a show. But the truth is that if you, and I know people here are not trying to be famous artists, and they're not trying to have an art exhibition next week, but consider this for a moment. If I do succeed in exhibiting things that I've made, and I have an exhibition, I may not find out what somebody thought until I read it on the internet. Like a week later, I mean, at the reception, everybody's just, my friends are going to come up and say, good job, and hug, you know what I mean? People are going to be, oh, I love your work, and I'm going to wonder if they're just phony or if they really meant it. But anybody who has anything else to say will say it to their friend on the way home. They're not going to say it to me. And then maybe a week later, I'll read on a blog, or maybe it used to be you'd be the newspaper or something like that. But you find out then, like, what somebody thought. But for the most part, you won't know. And you certainly won't have any kind of, you know what I mean? You put it out in the public, and that's what happens. That's what happens with productions. Now, rather than seeing the critique as, something, to survive and get through, which will probably be there no matter what I say, maybe I could see it as a safe trial run for that kind of thing, with a group of people who I work with and are sympathetic, and like that kind, like a safe kind of, like it stays in our class, and we get to sort of like practice responding and talking about the works, and I get to get a sense that people are going to try to tell me things with honesty. They're not just like, well, you know, oh, I love your work, and then I have to wonder if it's true or not, or something like, you know what I mean? I actually get to see it as a nice trial run where the stakes are not, you know, anything like the professional level. And everybody that's here is in the same boat, right? They're doing the same thing. They made something and they brought it in. And we've got an opportunity to actually open our brains and step outside of those social kind of conditioning things that I was talking about earlier, which everything else tends to do that. It tends to condition us to, uh, which is why we go around all the time, you know, and, uh, but we actually aren't really having substantive dialogue a lot, very much. We tend to have to make long-term relationships that have a lot of trust in them before we'll start going there. And now all of this, none of this, don't get the idea that we're going to get super heavy on Monday, but you know what I'm saying about this, right? We have great barriers towards that kind of substantive dialogue. And we might ask ourselves, well, why is that? Because we're not critiquing each other, we're critiquing something we made. You know, I may feel, as Thomas said, I took something personally and I got defensive, right? But they're not critiquing me. They're critiquing the thing that I made, right? So what happens is that we don't separate those kinds of things. That's why I said that thing about the tests. To my eye, that's kind of amazing. It's like day in and day out, we're sort of conditioned to, we're being evaluated in a certain way and we're used to that. And nobody is going to get mad on the playing field. I mean, although they sometimes do at the referees or the umpires or whatever, but we accept levels of, I mean, when I see coaches and how they talk to student athletes, I'd like to see a teacher do that in the classroom sometime. You know, a teacher's like, well, I don't think you're performing up to the best of your abilities, but a coach is like screaming at somebody and saying all kinds of stuff, trying to get them to, you know, but we accept that because that's what's normal, right? So what we have to do is practice the tactful ways. You know, we have to, well, how do you have conversations beyond just, I like it, I love it, you're great, you know, how do we really articulate, you know, it really is, it's a skill, just like drawing itself, to learn and to practice and to, and I will show you. You know, I've got a format, I've got a, you know, if you come to the critique, and I'll probably send out a handout that has a few other things saying, remember to do this and don't do that. But if you come into the critique in a frame of mind like what I'm saying, in which you see yourself as a portion of this organism that is our group, and we all participated in this and we all made our effort, and now we're going to have an exchange, and you say, no, I'm not going to get defensive. I'm not going to see this as a, you know, I'm testing everybody else to see, you know, if I can just sort of only garner you know, this kind of reaction rather than that. If we come into it with the right attitude and we're open and we're receptive and we try, because mostly what it's about is about trying for others. It's about trying to offer your reaction or your response for this other person. Yeah, you'll have no trouble telling somebody you think what they've done is very good. If what's about to come from you is a flattering remark, you will have no trouble doing that. But this isn't just about that and that only. You know, it's about specific works that have been made, what's working, what's not working, you know, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about that you may not even be aware of, and that I will fill that in. You'll see, I have a format. I have a way that I conduct and lead critique is basically designed to break us away from some of the patterns that I've seen, some of the like most common errors or problems in critique that I've observed over the years. I've developed some systems to try to deal with that. And so there'll be a lot of, you know, you'll get a lot of, I will steward the thing. I'll be the moderator. I'll be the, you know, so forth. And you'll get called on. Everybody will get called on. So if you have, you know, if you have the video off and but do expect to be called on, and not just like once, because your piece could come up repeatedly, because other people may want to talk about it, you know. So again, if what you've had in the past has been like, well, when it's my turn, and then when I'm done, or something like that, not necessarily. Can you promise me your drawings by, now, a very smart partner of mine says it should be midnight on Sunday, but could you promise me your drawings by 11 a.m. on Monday at the absolute latest, or before that? Because I have to put them together, and you know, so people can look at them and we can look at them together, and like I have to do some things, right? And I don't want to be, you know, trying to, you know, even if you're up late working on your drawing, which I hope you work on this with enough, you know, you break up work sessions enough that you're not, you know, trying to complete your drawing at the very last minute. But I also know that people have a lot of stuff coming at them in a lot of different classes in a lot of different places. So if you're actually, you know, that, well, if you want the entirety of Sunday night, okay. But I need to have it with enough time so I'm not trying to still organize something for our Zoom critique, you know what I mean, with our meeting time coming. Traditionally, critique has been the kind of thing where, you know, like people will bring snacks, you know. We can't bring snacks, but we can sort of be in our most giving, present thinking. You know what I mean? Like there's sometimes in a class where all you got to do is just sort of like be watching something. Like that's all you got to do. You know, you just kind of like sort of check in and be sort of, you know, you can be an audience member. Critique, you're a participant, right? So, you know, whatever else is going on, try to forget about it and brush it off, and sort of try to enter a critique sort of with enthusiasm to see what everybody else has done, with a lot of positive attitude, a lot of ready to talk, you know, like ready to sort of like offer up whatever you can. And if everybody's doing that, then things generally go quite well. Questions about critique? I'm still reveling in Thomas giving me that defensive answer, because I usually fish for that and I don't get it. But then, yeah. Yeah, don't come to critique defensive, right? Thou shalt not come to critique defensive. Any questions? Do you remember the things that I said when I was talking about the homework, making of the homework, that questions you can kind of ask yourself or keep in mind while you're making the drawing, that also, if you come to critique, having thought about the questions, you're better prepared? Somebody give me some of those. There were like two big ones. Remember? Remember, what do you want a viewer to think or feel when they look at remember that one? What would you like for a viewer to think or feel when they look at the work? If you've thought about that ahead of time or whatever, then you'll be better prepared, right? And then I think just being able to articulate the experience that you had making your drawing, what you were setting out to do, what your intention was, what your idea was, what you were trying to do, you know, and then what happened, along the way between the conceiving and the making of it. You know, come with that sort of clear in your head, right? What was a really obvious, simple thing I told you to watch out for? Like, don't let this happen. Somebody always does this, and don't do that. Do you remember that? Anybody remember like a common? Anybody remember this? Make sure you have a drawing that has enough contrast. Make sure you've checked that your drawing, when it's put, and of course in this case it's not going to be put up on the white wall with all of us sitting farther back than it probably was when you're in your corner of the world in your room like working on it. But you might actually you know sort of try to put it into a format where you can sort of assess how it's going to look to other people. At the minimum, that means like taking some pictures with your phone and like looking at them, like, you know. But if it was me, I might even, do you have personal rooms? Do you have Zoom personal rooms that you can go, you know, like if it was me, I would probably like take my reproduction, which you're trying to make really good, and you're trying to make a really good picture. I would probably take the reproduction of the drawing and I would probably like look at it post, you know what I mean, in my personal Zoom room, like what is this going to look like for everybody else? Because it could save you, you know, if your drawing is too faint or too light or doesn't have enough contrast or doesn't, you know what I mean, you may, you know, then you can just avoid that kind of thing, in which like once you see everybody's drawings up together, which by the way may be the most significant and profound experience of the whole critique, is actually just coming in and seeing what everybody did all of a sudden like that in the moment. It's always kind of a big deal. But you don't want to be the one with like the drawing that just sort of like doesn't assert itself visually because it's so light or faint or something like that. And you just take some time to sort of like try to see what it's going to look like to everybody else, right? And then look at it and think like, if this was somebody else's, this is another one of those questions. If this was somebody else's work and I came upon it, what would I think? What would my reaction be? What would I think it was about? How would I feel about how it is drawn? What would my response be? You know, and to begin to develop the ability to do that. Okay. But the main thing is to just make dazzling displays of, you know, cerebral, brilliant, intelligent, you know, ideas, and then carry them out with mind-bending virtuosity, and then bring that to critique. That works. That's what you're going to do, right? They're going to be like wicked smart drawings, and they're going to be like beautiful drawings, right? Just you wait, Mullins. Just you wait. Remember what's on the handout, you know, put in your time, be honest, have fun, and make it with loving care. What do I mean by that? Is that just something I like to say, or what does that mean? What does that mean? Make it with loving care. First critique practice prompt. What would that mean? Something looks like it was made with loving care. Are you able to tell if somebody is invested in their work, or is it just always a mystery?
You could probably tell by the amount of time they spend on detail work or trying to get angles to look just right, or sort of even if it's not like a super detailed thing, but if it sort of has a cohesive feel to it and it doesn't just sort of look jagged and put together, that would probably be what you'd expect.
Would you all agree with that? That there's like, you'll be able to see visual evidence if the artist was really invested in their work? Or maybe perhaps there's a look that, you know it when you see it, that says that they weren't so much invested in it. Does that exist too, right? Can you tell? Is it easier to see than it is to articulate? Maybe. I mean, we all know time put in, right? I asked you guys before about that sort of thing. Like, can you work on something forever and can it still come out poor? And unfortunately, that can be the case. Can you do something really quick and it works? Unfortunately, that can be the case. But outside of just, punching the time clock kind of thing, there may be other visual indicators or other visual things, you know what I mean, that tell us or don't tell us, that you were, really into what you were doing, or, like it'll come through, right? Probably. I also think that artists can talk about that kind of stuff themselves. Like, I made a piece, and, I'm probably the best person qualified to talk about how well the outcome matched my intent, right? The rest of us have to work very hard to try to understand your intent. That's a real big thing to get out of critique, is to try to develop the ability to not only to react to things cold, but also sort of like to be able to, sort of glean what people were going for. And usually that takes a big assist from the maker themselves. Like, the maker has to disclose a lot, but you'd be amazed with time and experience how good you can actually get, at that kind of thing. Well, if there aren't further questions, I'm not going to collect the this 18 by 24 page that's going to have a menagerie of animals on it. You can send that to me after the critique, right? Because right now, I want your undivided attention and your focus on that drawing, okay? And then once we've completed Critique Monday, then any outstanding work that you need to resolve or you need to send to me, then, like the sketchbook, you can resume sketchbook in earnest after that or whatever. But my guess is that these drawings for critique need your attention. So
About the animal sketching, do we need one for each animal, or do we need multiple, or like how many should
well,
we
you
have?
won't necessarily do every animal. I was encouraging people to, if you draw an animal, then make sure you draw it a different way, like try to create a, if you draw an animal this way, then draw it, here's a line one, here's a tone one, but your page will fill up probably before you've drawn all of these animals. No one is required to draw all 8 animals, just pick them, and fill up the page. And the scale, of course, can vary. Okay, so you'll probably hear from me with a little critique preparation, handout between, the next few days. But I think I did a decent job of covering the main sort of critique preparation points. And I think once we get going and you see how I conduct critique, it'll probably like become pretty organic and run. So for now, just remember, what to do on your end. And if you need to check in with me or something, do so. I am mostly just eager in seeing what you do, seeing your places and spaces and your drawings about them. Okay. Have very good Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Okay. And don't be late for critique. I will see you on Monday. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very welcome.